Uganda, East Africa. The presentation starts at Kampala, the capital city, known for its scenic location on several hills, providing a year-round comfortable climate 4 degrees north of the equator. The university, housing the American Teacher Education for East Africa team in 1961, was built earlier by the British in a style shown by the administration building, with some modern additions later. There were some 700 African students, about 10% of them Indians, the latter from the commercial business sector of the country. All students received free tuition, room and board. As shown, there was a separate dormitory for the female students. The 100 Americans were to teach senior high school students only in preparation for the demanding Cambridge entrance examination to the university. Uganda has achieved independence in 1961, and that was followed by extended celebrations. Unfortunately, a decade or so afterwards, the country was ruled under a very vicious dictatorship, effectively destroying much of the progress accomplished during previous times. The numerous modern buildings in the city were constructed largely for the European personnel, including the administrative staff, and Indians representing the clerical and trade commercial population. On the outskirts there were some modest slums, but overall the city presented a very prosperous appearance. The population of Kampala came mostly from the Baganda tribe, the largest in the country, and ruled in a relaxed traditional manner by the king, referred to as the Kabaka. The schools were good. In the best ones, the girls wearing a neat uniform of blue skirts and yellow blouses, a style which was adapted by some of the girls of easy virtue in the city in hope of upping the price and desirability. The most impressive structure was the new Parliament building, constructed for independence in 1961. While the government had a democratic structure, many of the African representatives from the tribal regions, some 35 or so in total, did not have the proper command of English, the official language of the country, to contribute properly to the discussions. The Indian population of the city, arriving in the 1920s when the rail line was built from the coast, represented the middle class, engaged in trade and commerce and some clerical work. They also had an impressive Hindu temple. As could be expected, racial discrimination was practiced, but on a low key. The Muslim population, originally Arab traders moving inland from the coast, had a handsome mosque in the expected style. Remarkably, about half of the Baganda was assumed to be Christians, Catholics or Protestants, the result of conversion by the missionaries who arrived with the British to Uganda. Several native markets, mainly on the outskirts of the city, offered anything and everything for sale, including poached leopard skins or elephant tusks of moderate size. There were also extensive repair shops offering to repair and rebuild anything from automobiles to sewing machines, the craftsmen often being semi-literate but capable to the expected degree. Leaving Kampala and traveling towards the northeastern part of the country, after some 50 miles or so, one enters a very different world where the Karamojong tribe lives in a traditional setting. The landscape changes rather suddenly to a harsh, semi-arid grassland with few trees. There are remnants of eroded volcanic peaks with no human habitation present for many miles along the rough road. The Karamojong lifestyle resembles rather closely that of the Maasai in Kenya and Tanzania. The single overriding interest was in cattle, with the entire value system centered on the herds. The more animals, the wealthier the owner. The cattle were the zebu type, originally derived from India, able to survive on rough pastures with little water during much of the year. The animals were on the move practically all the time, with the men guarding the herd with 8-feet-long spears, and a few women carrying open baskets of millet and water in the ubiquitous calabash. The land ownership was tribal, hence no person could claim any specific land beyond a small homestead. In the traditional setting and manner, a young man wanting to get married had to pay a bride price of 40 cows for a desirable young girl. An old widow could be had for 8. At night, the cattle were herded into makeshift thorn bush enclosures to protect against theft. There were practically no lions or leopards in the region. The gate to the thorn bush enclosure was built very low, so that any raider would have to stoop down, thereby being prevented from using his spear. Due to occasional British patrols, death from raids was relatively low, and in any case it was taken as the time-honored tribal custom. The compounds were generally decrepit structures and presented a desolate appearance. A few ramshackle huts with sagging platforms to store the millet, a chicken coop or two, often with no birds, practically no agricultural implements beyond a simple homemade hoe and axe to cut the poles for the huts. The Karamojong display the so-called Nilo-Hamitic phenotype, originating in the upper Nile Valley and generally involved with pastoralism. The men are tall and well-built, and due to the warm climate, great shortage of water, and the effect of the rough thorn bush, generally went around naked, but when herding the cattle, always carrying 8-feet-long spears. The women wore a ragged piece of cotton cloth wrap or sometimes a roughly tanned goat-hide cloak. As expected, they did all the domestic work and also looked after the few plots of millet planted here and there. Child mortality was high due to several diseases and no proper medical care available. An important person in traditional African life is the witch doctor, shown here dressed in a rather outlandish manner. The Karamojong, like all cultures, have their own beliefs and prefer to remain isolated in their own world. Practically none of the people spoke English, but with the strong tribal bonds, the group appeared to be self-reliant and one may suggest even satisfied with its way of life.